Hello, everyone. Welcome to this live session. Erica Ayala here. And before I get started, I want to make sure to dedicate this live to Breonna Taylor. For those who do not know, Breonna Taylor was shot and killed in her own home. She was a healthcare worker, and I want to honor her memory today. Thank you for joining me here at Sports Talk with Erica Lindsay Ayala. Let me know in the chat, where are you watching from? Where are you watching? Where are you? How are you? I'm here in New York, and I'm here to talk about a new project that I'll be doing. I am a sports reporter, and I almost exclusively cover women's sports. Hey, New York City. All right. Gladys in Seattle. Oh, Toronto. Hello, hello. All right. Welcome, everyone. And for a while, I've been wanting to have critical conversations. Mike Murphy, the stats man. Hey, Mike. Love you, buddy. Beverly in NoCal. Good to see you, or see you in the chat at least. I've been for a while wanting to have critical conversations in the women's sports space, particularly in the hockey space. And unfortunately, a lot of things that are happening in our country and around the world have really accelerated this project for me. I just had a conference with Blake Bolden and Ali Thunstrom today, and that will be the first episode of this new social justice in women's hockey series that I'm going to put together. It's a conversation with primarily women's hockey players, but it's going to be people in the women's hockey space, fans, coaches, media members, to have critical conversations. Women's hockey, I think, is really unique in a lot of ways, and a lot of great ways. Oh, also, excuse me, I forgot to say Happy Pride to everyone. June 1st here. And Pride is actually a good example. I think women's hockey has taught me a lot about how I identify and how that is a privilege in certain spaces. There are things that I don't think about on a daily basis. And the women's hockey space really brought me up to speed. I always love to give a shout out to Jessica Platt and Harrison Brown in particular for guiding me. And I had to do some unlearning in the women's hockey space. But I've always felt that if the women's hockey space could bring that out of me and teach me in a loving way, that we can also do that for other people that occupy this space, who love hockey, who love women's hockey, who play women's hockey. And so that's what this series is going to be about. Again, it's going to be conversations, critical conversations. I mentioned Ali Thunstrom and Blake Bolden. I'm going to go briefly over something that happened with Ali. I guess it was Thursday of last week. She is living in Minnesota. Those of you who, I'm sure all of you have come into some contact with what's happening in Minnesota, and again, around the world. In Minnesota, George Floyd was killed, and at the hands of law enforcement, and lots of rallies and protests in his name have sparked up. Hey, Jeff Rojas, Twin Cities, welcome. Glad to have you. Hope you're well. Hope everyone is well from wherever you're watching. These rallies and, buildings are burning, cars are burning, businesses have been looted. I don't want to stray away from the real. That is exactly what's happening right now in Minnesota and around this country. And it's a symptom of a lot of pain, of a lot of grief. Regardless of how I might feel personally about how that grief manifests, unfortunately, and almost fortunately in a way, about 3 years ago, I was struck with a grief that I thought was going to be unbearable, and I lost someone close to me, my father. And since then, I've been much more thoughtful of how others grieve. I'm still grieving my father. I probably always will. And I say that because I'm not here to make any sweeping indictments on what is happening around the world. Instead, I want this space and I want this series to allow people to have conversations that go a little bit deeper. And so Allie Thunstrom is from Minnesota. She's living in Minnesota and witnessing this. And at the time, it was really centralized to Minnesota, what has been happening since George Floyd's death. And she tweeted something essentially that showed a lot of concern, and she was upset about what was happening in her community, but it also lacked compassion, and it was tone deaf to why she was experiencing the things that she was, especially because Allie Thunstrom is white. George Floyd was a black man. And there was an exchange that happened on Twitter, and I jumped into the chat, not to defend Allie. That's, I don't think, my place, and I don't think she needs me to do that. She's an adult. It was more so to explain to people that there are levels of grief, and Allie's tweet can be triggering, but so can, and I found some of the responses to Allie triggering in a lot of different ways. And I think when we react in certain ways, we miss an opportunity to learn. We miss an opportunity to teach others how to be more compassionate and considerate. And so I'm very thankful that Allie agreed to be one of my first guests on this new show, along with Blake Bolden. And Allie and Blake both come from Boston College, and they've known each other for a number of years now. And I remember reaching out privately to Allie, and she had mentioned that she was speaking to Blake Bolden. And I was just very curious as Allie started to tell me some of the things that Blake was asking her to take in and as resources. I just thought it was a really interesting conversation to have two people who know each other, and then me as a facilitator who knows both of them, but in different capacities, to have a conversation about what we all brought to the situation, how we all feel about the situation, and then kind of shift that energy. If I'm doing my, what is the energy? Tai Chi, right? When you shift energy. If I were to Tai Chi that moment, what I wanted to do was take all of our energy, all of our real life experience, all of the frustration that we had, and kind of shift that energy into a conversation, and truly thinking of what women's hockey could be if we took that energy and really just focused it on allowing women's hockey to be a more open space, so that the frustrations, the tone-deaf tweets, or the microaggressions, or even the flat-out bigotry and racism that happens in the women's hockey space, we'll get to the general hockey space later, but in the women's hockey space, I just thought that this could be a powerful moment. And thankfully, Blake and Allie were both open to that. I've since reached out to other athletes who are also open to having this conversation. So that's what this will be. Originally, I was going to launch another endeavor that had to do with women's basketball. And we're going to put that on pause, one, out of respect to some of the athletes who women's basketball is primarily played, at least in the WNBA, by Black women, women who identify as African American. And I think the pain and the rage, the frustration is very different in that space. I relate to that a little bit more than the conversations and the energy I've had to put into women's hockey spaces. Both are draining, though. And so I want to be respectful of that process. But I also think the women's hockey space right now, generally speaking, we know that women's hockey visually is very white. I think there are a lot more layers, multicultural layers, that we don't always give hockey credit for. But I want to lift those up. So that's kind of the spiel, but I want to know from you, how are you processing what is happening? Again, I'm not here to get too much into what Allie's tweeted or didn't tweet. You'll get to hear from her. So I'll leave that to her to answer, but I'm very curious. What are your thoughts? Do you think women's hockey is ready to have deep, critical conversations when it comes to social justice, when it comes to these athletes being seen as role models because of what they can do on the ice and honestly what their place in history in women's hockey history is? Can that be harnessed into more social justice movements? Again, it's Pride. We're celebrating Pride. We have a community that's hurting, a Black community that's hurting. We have a hockey space where multicultural fans and athletes continually tell us that they're not 100% comfortable. So what can women's hockey do about that? How can women's hockey be proactive? I'd love to hear what you think. Beverly, now is definitely the time. I agree. I think it's unfortunate that this has been a spark, and I'll speak only for me, or that really pushed me to complete some of the things that have been on my mind. I really honestly struggle with that, but I want to move forward in a way where I don't miss another opportunity. And so that's how I'm moving forward, and that's why I'm moving forward. Gal Pal Sports. Yes, I give a lot of credit to Allie, who has talked to a number of people, from what I understand, Blake included, and the three of us had a really powerful conversation. Both of them shared things that I don't know that they've shared publicly. And I don't think it's not like breaking news or anything, but they connected some dots for me that I didn't immediately see. And that's exactly what Blake did for Allie by giving her some resources. So I think there's some power in what this can be. Yeah, Gladys, I think hockey could be more inclusive. I agree with you, Gladys. Gladys Knight, I recognize that name from Twitch. Mike Murphy, I have a lot of optimism for women's hockey as an inclusive sport and community. But we also need to acknowledge it can be and has to be better. One needs only look at Soroya Tinker's story. Yes, Mike, thank you for bringing up Soroya Tinker. You should definitely check out her Twitter. She's shared her own personal story, but she's also shared a lot of resources. And Soroya is someone I already have lined up for this new series that will live here on this YouTube page. So make sure, if you're not already, that you subscribe. The first, I should say, episode with Allie and Blake. I'm hoping to get that to you all by Wednesday. So you can subscribe. And if you hit the notifications, you'll know anytime that I go live, but also when that episode is ready, or the next episode is ready. Beverly says, can't wait for the men. Yeah, I agree with that on a lot of things. I think women's hockey is its own space. It has its own culture. And there's a lot of power in that. Sydney, similarly to you, I believe I'm putting my feelings and energy into my work and passion for changing the sports world. Yes. I mean, I took yesterday to kind of be in my feelings, and there were heavy feelings, including that I felt that I was, being pulled into spaces that, not that I wasn't comfortable, but I didn't enter those spaces begrudgingly. I want to make that clear. But I was a little taken off guard about how emotional those spaces were. So yes, Sydney, exactly. I needed to take some time to harness that energy again, Tai Chi it out, and hopefully this new show will be that. Greyhound 412, Tinker has been extremely helpful getting that information out. Yeah. Blake Bolden actually gave her a shout out. I spoke with Blake and Allie. We started at around 6 p.m. Eastern. And, Blake opened up about that. That's not something that at Soroya's age, Blake was willing to do. And again, that was one of the more powerful moments, because Blake gets all this attention for being a pioneer, and she is. She's the first in almost every category, first Black woman to do insert stat. But that's also very heavy. And she doesn't always open up about that, but she did with Allie and I. Check out, Soroya's interview on Power Play. I saw that came out. Power Play is an amazing an amazing newsletter that's run by Lindsay Gibbs. I actually have some work that I've done with her in the women's hockey space. I haven't read it yet. I was on with Blake and Allie, but I definitely want to check that out. I'll make sure to drop that in the links for anyone who's watching this, or in the description, I should say, for anyone who's going to be watching this when we're not live. Gal Pal Sports feels as though women's hockey needs to let go of fear of saying the wrong thing. Very few players are willing to speak out about anything, let alone this. I love that. Let go of the fear. I think you're right. And Allie was hinting at this a little bit, and I've had conversations with other players. I did an interview, this is several years ago now, but it was published in the Victory Press, and I spoke to Kelsey Colzer, Blake Bolden. I spoke to Megan Huertas. Hey, I love saying that name. Cubano. Love it. Anyway, I think there's this responsibility that women's hockey players feel to protect women's hockey. And I think that's where that fear comes from. It's societal and systemic, not necessarily just racism, but then you add sexism and, you add gender to the mix. So, Sydney, yes, self-care is important in this process. Absolutely. Before what's happening now, coronavirus almost seems like something in the past, which in and of itself is really wild to wrap my head around. I'm having a lot of difficulty with that because it's not something that has passed. But yes, I've been really practicing sharpening the saw when it comes to self-care practices. Mike, I was heartened to see the PWHPA and the NWHL speak out in support of the protests and to amplify the voices of Soroya and Sarah Nurse and others. Gives me optimism. I think, yes, there has been a shift, dare I say, throughout our society. However, as someone who comes from the nonprofit space, and particularly youth leadership development and advocacy in that space, I'm always very hesitant to give too much credit for what happens on social media, which is why I'm very encouraged by some of the conversations that I've had in this space, and that everyone that I've spoken to and who you'll hear from soon is willing to be challenged. And that's a big chunk of the battle right there. Notably absent, though, are the voices of the women's hockey WCHA teams. Yeah, I think it was Boston University had a really powerful statement and actually retweeted or quote tweeted Soroya. You've seen a few other teams. This is sometimes where I struggle, and I don't honestly know if maybe this is because I do identify as Black. If I'm being honest, everyone, I gotta be honest, fam, I don't always have the energy to call people out when it comes to this. And also, this is just a sad, I don't know that I expect much. It kind of breaks my heart even saying it out loud and publicly, but I really don't know that I expect much, which is why it's so overwhelming to me when people reach out to me personally or they speak out publicly. It's really hard for me to articulate what that feels like because it's so very new. I just turned 34, and that's a very new feeling for me. So I don't know. I have trouble doing that. I appreciate people who do. I just don't always have the energy, especially not right now, to do that, to do the calling out. But I see who does tweet. I see who doesn't tweet. I also see who tweets about people who do and don't tweet and language and stuff. So I see all of it. I just don't always actively participate. Actions speak louder than words. Exactly, Sydney. I agree with you there. I think there have been some of the strongest statements that I've ever seen. Unfortunately, we could rattle off a list that would take up this entire time when it comes to names of people that have fallen victim to a system of racism and white supremacy. This does seem a little bit different, and I'm not exactly sure why. I'm not sure how much of that has to do with, again, we're not even coming off of, we're still in the middle of a global pandemic. I don't know if that's it. I don't know if it's that those people in the social media space. I mean, I'm like a millennial cusp. you know, it's a different younger generation. I don't know. I think time will tell, but all the more reason why I want to use this space that I have to. The way I was explaining this to my sister is, again, I'm I don't know that I have the energy or the words to really get into what I feel about what, is happening and what it looks like right now. I think we can all agree that generally speaking, violence and destruction of property, the killing with impunity, those are all bad things. But I don't have the energy really to get into the justification one way or another. What's the worst? What's worse? I just don't like to be in that space. But what I've come to realize is that what's important for me is to wrap myself around people when they come out of that. You're not going to be able to loot and burn things forever. You're not going to be able to smash windows forever. There comes a time where you've let go of that negative energy. And if we're not careful as a society, that energy will seem dormant, but it doesn't go away. And I think we have an opportunity right now to do a little bit more work immediately following the pain and the grief that's happening. And that's where I want to spend my energy, and that's what I hope that this show will be for women's hockey. Mike says, as a lifelong NHL fan and someone who has covered men's hockey longer than women's hockey, my expectations couldn't be lower for the NHL. I have learned to expect very little. Yeah, again, I just think this is a really interesting time. Sports is reeling, over the pandemic and so eager to get back. I would imagine, obviously I'm not in these meetings, but there's a point in time where I can picture businesses being flustered and exhausted by now having to deal, right, with what's happening in the aftermath of, Floyd's death and his killing, and that's kind of sad too, right? One, because that means there was never, if my assumptions are correct, there was never a mechanism put in place. George Floyd is not the first man to die in the custody of law enforcement that was filmed, not even close to the first. And we don't have, as a society, mechanisms, and certainly in the sports world, to have, again, these thoughtful conversations. And that really is heartbreaking. And it's not just, we're talking right now primarily about the Black community. There are communities that get even less opportunity to grieve and to have their grief and grievances heard. And I'm aware of that as well. And that's sad. That's really, really sad. Someone said, I was really affected by, or Gladys, by Akeem Alou's article about how he was treated. Yeah, and one of the pieces of the conversation with Allie and Blake that almost leveled me, truly, was Allie describing what she felt reading that article. I think if you look at Allie, right, she's white, she's a woman. It never occurred to me, honestly, that Allie could relate to Akeem's article. And what she shared today, really, it kind of threw me. And just thinking of it now, I'm a little ashamed in some ways that, as someone who's been a Division I athlete, obviously nowhere near the level of Blake and Allie, but as someone who grew up playing girls and women's sports, that I didn't connect those dots a little bit clearer. And in that moment, as she was speaking, I was also thinking of how she was saying that Blake introducing 13th, which is a documentary, it's on Netflix, I believe. It's about the 13th Amendment, which essentially just quick little, American history. It abolishes slavery with exception to if a person, in this case, particularly Black but any person truly is deemed a criminal. And Allie said that that documentary connected a lot of dots for her, and Allie sharing her connection to the Akeem story just really, you know, it was powerful. I'm looking forward to sounds weird, but I'm glad that she felt comfortable to share that, because that was really powerful. Had to have a think after seeing Soraya have to say sorry to offend anyone in her own statement. You know, that's really interesting, Gal Pal Sports. I think that's also something that has frustrated me, and it's not necessarily anyone's fault. But there are two things that I think I find personally triggering. One is what you're saying, right? That people, especially that identify as Black, having to apologize, you know, preemptively, for saying and sharing their own experience. That's heartbreaking. But another thing that I find a little exhausting is people who don't identify as Black feeling the need to start their statement of solidarity with, I'm not Black. I don't know, maybe I'm just being a little nitpicky here, but again, I think let's rise up to what the statement is really about, which presumably is about the fact that you support that Black Lives Matter. Maybe I just want people to cut to the chase. I don't know, and that's an agitation that I have to deal with. But it's real. Just sharing that's a little tough for me sometimes, and I always try to encourage people to, you know, start with what you're going to do. Start with your support, because, you know, I know that people, and I've done this myself, and so that's why I feel a little hypocritical saying this, but you know, when you do so much explaining about your process, it becomes about you. And I think in public statements, at least, I think we should make it about what it's about, you know? So that's just a piece of advice. This is Erica speaking as Erica. I'm not speaking for the entire Black Latina community. I encourage you to think if what I said resonates with you, and if it doesn't seem true for you, or if it's something that, you know, you want to play around with and ask other people about, please, by all means, do that. I'm just sharing my truth right now. In you know, and being honest that could just be my trigger, right? That could be just where I'm coming from, that I need to reassess why that bothers me, and maybe take a few deep breaths and take a few steps back. So yeah, I think the advice that I've been giving to people is, you know, is just start by saying Black Lives Matter. And this is why, again, as someone who identifies as Black, this is why I think that this is important. I don't find that controversial. I don't find it revolutionary to say that Black Lives Matter. I have pins. I give away pins that say Black Lives Matter. I just don't. I have had to become aware that people do see that as controversial. I've had family members tell me, Erica, don't put that in your bio. Don't wear that pin when you're on camera. Don't, you know, do these things. Even my father, while he was living, would tell me those things. And I hear them, and I know they come from a good place, but I've never been able to sit with that or to accept that. But I do realize that some people have difficulty saying Black Lives Matter. Do I think that immediately means that they're racist? Me personally, no. I think another thing I'd love for us as a society to do is really break down racism and bigotry and ignorance, and be able to, they're all related, of course, but I think there's a little bit more work we can do as a society there. But for those who have trouble saying Black Lives Matter and saying it publicly, my advice to you would be, if you really are trying to figure out where you're at, emotionally, mentally, politically, socially, and you're having trouble saying Black Lives Matter out loud publicly or tweeting that, maybe you should find people who don't identify as Black to help check you. I think it might be really tough for someone who's Black to hear you say that you have trouble saying Black Lives Matter. I just think that that's a little tough. Just as it, I'm sure, doesn't sound great to someone who identifies as trans or queer to have people that they love or people that they associate with say things. I don't even want to repeat these things. I mean, we all, I don't know, we all, but you know, things that they struggle with their decisions or the way they are. You know, I don't think that everyone means that the way it sounds, but it is essentially dehumanizing. I mean, I have to be real with you. It's dehumanizing. So if you're not there yet, I personally am not passing judgment, but I am asking that you do some of that work perhaps with allies as opposed to with someone who identifies, in this case, as Black. That would be my advice to anyone who is in that space. And then if and when you get there, then, you know, then I'm here to wrap you in love and provide you resources. Jasmine, I'm not sure if you need to reassess. First of all, hi, Jasmine. It's a decisive statement. No need to separate yourself from the oppressed. Exactly. Yes. Correct. You know, I think it just sounds weird if I were to say, you know, as a straight person, happy Pride. Why do I need to say that first part? Like, just like, you know, we need like good editing when it comes to that stuff. I shouldn't need to say that. I can just say happy Pride. That doesn't change who I am, but it means so much to someone who maybe didn't think that they would hear me say happy Pride, or didn't think that I thought of the importance of saying happy Pride, or, you know, something like that. So no need to separate yourself from the oppressed. I feel the same way, starting with I am not Black. Hits me the same way. Goes against your team argument you mentioned in your five-step game plan. You know, having a team is not easy. But you're right. If you are going to be in this space and commit yourself to learning, then you have to start with my first of 5 steps. I had 5 steps. My first thing was just say Black Lives Matter. Just try it, say it in the mirror, write it on a piece of paper, see how it fits, you know? See how it hits you. If you can accept that, then the next pieces of the plan are to be about it. Get your team together. Get people who, now I said in my plan, get people who think differently than you, and I do agree with that. However, you can edit what that looks like, and that's okay as well. The third thing was, you know, if you're a team or you're preparing for something in the workplace, you have to put in, work. You have to get educated. Maybe you watch film. Maybe you talk to people. Maybe you do some research on the company. It's the same way. I mentioned Ella Baker is someone who I really love learning from. Also Asada Shakur, Howard Zinn, Brian Stevenson, Michelle Alexander. Great. 13th is a great documentary. Let's see if I can remember. There's another documentary. I'm going to forget the filmmaker, so my apologies. I'll put it in the comments or in the description. The house, I think it's the house. Is it the house I live in or the house they live in? Anyone know what I'm talking about? If you know what I'm referring to, it's a documentary on mass incarceration. Put it in the comments because now I'm forgetting. I think it's the house we live in. I'm going to make sure to link that. Fantastic work, very tough to digest. We're all on Team Human. And to me, as a part of Team Human, all humans matter. All love is valid. Everyone deserves to feel safe, respected, and valued, regardless of their skin color. I hear what you're saying, Mike. I hear what you're saying. And if we're all on Team Human, then you know what? Black Lives Matter. And unfortunately, we have a society that, again, is very uncomfortable saying that. I think all humans, obviously, are valued. But if we want that to be true, right? Just like if we want hockey is for everyone to be true, then we have to show that with our acts and not just our words. All right, I think I'm going to start wrapping up. I've had you for about 35 minutes. I'm very excited. I will, again, make sure to add all of the links. I had a great conversation with Allie Thunstrom and Blake Bolden. I am set to speak with Soroya Tinker, Liz Knox, and I will speak next week. The Packers, both Madison and Anya Packer, I'm in conversations to chat with them. So I also have some media members that have reached out. So I want this to, again, be a space where we're all learning. I want this to be a space where I'm challenged just as much as I'm able to lovingly challenge the audience and the guests that we have on. Thank you, Gladys. Always good to see you in the comments, in the chat. Thank you, Sydney. I'm glad you're looking forward to it. Make sure if you're not already subscribed that you do that. I'll put a little reminder up here. Does anyone know what this is? Do you know what this is? I cut my finger earlier today. In the restaurant industry, we have a specific name for these, but they're technically called a finger cut, but they kind of look like, well, you know. Anyway, that's really random. I'm sorry. Gal Pal Sports, thank you. Greyhound, thank you. Finger condoms, there it is. I knew someone was going to know that. So it's so distracting. The ones I used to have in the restaurant were blue. I think I'd much prefer blue than this kind of color. Ugh, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? But I was doing dishes and I didn't want my Band-Aid to get all soggy. That's gross. That's like the worst. Okay, not literally. Of all things, right? I should not say that that's literally the worst. So psyched about this series. Thank you, Beverly. Thank you so much. If you haven't subscribed, make sure you do that. Set the notifications. Once I edit Allie and Blake, I will know a little bit better what the schedule is looking like. I mentioned some of the names that we have. We're working out some of that scheduling. I hope to have it be something that we can, roll out every, I don't know, let's say Wednesday or something like that, but still in the early stages. But I want to hear from you all. I'm hoping to set up some kind of community, maybe on Facebook or something like that, where I can post resources, but also I want to hear from the community, right? Because that's what this is supposed to be about. It's not just me interviewing players. I mean, I do that in a lot of other spaces and I love doing that, but this is supposed to start a conversation. So we have to pull in a lot of people. So I think we got it. I think we got it all. Do you like my new head wrap? This literally came in when you see the interview with Allie and Blake. I was not wearing this, but this came in the mail. I'm very excited. This is a protective wrap. It's silk lined. I'm very excited for this. Jeff, thank you so much. And thank you for everyone who is on here that is also a member of the Patreon posse. You know that I was struggling with this idea and how it was going to come together, and you really helped me out. We got to some of the questions, loosely that were offered in Patreon and with Allie and Blake, and I'll also use those as guideposts moving forward. Compliments, the glasses. Thank you. Yeah, I get a gnarly glare sometimes with these glasses when I do these. I gotta get a light setup, once I blow up Casey Neistat style, we'll soup up the studio. You see, I've got, as always, my Blake Bolden jersey holding it down. Oh, they're so great, Sydney. I'm telling you. I'll pop the link on social media or something. They took a little while to get here, but I mean, worldwide pandemic, I guess. Of course, I'm just joking, being facetious. But anyway, circle lights. Yeah, ring light, right? I got to get one of those. Be fancy. I'll be super fancy. All right, stay tuned for the first installment of the series. Who do you want to hear from? Before you leave, pop in the comments. Who would you like to see on this series? And again, I am not expecting to only have Black people or multicultural athletes and multicultural media members on here. And if I do, I want to couple them with someone who doesn't identify in the same way they do. That's the goal, at least. But to challenge women's hockey, you have to ask different questions of players and coaches and everyone. But who do you want to hear from? Let me know. I'll stick around for a little bit just so I can get that. Oh, Mie Dench. You know, thank you for mentioning Mie Dench. My conversation with Mie started really sparking this idea. I didn't know it was going to look exactly like this, but I had done the interview on the Victory Press, which I love, still one of my favorite articles I've ever written. But Mie really started breaking down for me that there is a trepidation. And, you know, she was willing to accept that some of that is because it's women's hockey and there's this feeling and obligation to protect the sport. But I think Mie also opened my eyes to that there's something else going on. And it's too much a part of the culture too. We were talking politics, but it's just a little too natural for the culture to overlook things even when they're right in front of you. So shout out to the Dench Factor, Mie Dench. How's she doing these days? I gotta hit up Mie Dench. All right, that's 2 votes for Mie Dench. So, all right, Mie it is. She's a good interview. The Dench Factor. Shout out to my former Founding 4 Pod co-host. Gotta pull that one out of the archives, Mike, for everyone so they know what we're talking about. The Dench Factor. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for your time on this Monday. I know it's been a trying time for a lot of us in a lot of different ways. I'm sending you love here in New York City. I thank you so much for being here with me tonight. And we're going to, Anya Packer, we're going to have her, Jeff. Don't you worry about it. We got her lined up. And, I'm excited for this journey. I'm encouraged by it. And I'm thankful that I have this to look forward to, if I'm being honest. It's going to be a lot of work, and I will stumble, in more ways than one, I'm sure. And I'll say things that I, maybe didn't think of, just like anyone else, but we're in it together. So I'm out for now. Soroya, I'm interviewing her on Thursday. So I hope to have Allie and Blake out before then. Also, make sure to check out Soroya Tinker. She's in Power Plays. I haven't read it yet, Lindsay Gibbs, but I am excited for it. Lindsay Gibbs is amazing. Ooh, an official of color. I'm glad okay, let's connect. Officials, yes, we want to include officials here. I almost didn't read that comment, but yes, officials, multicultural officials. Oh, I bet there are stories. I would love to hear them. What was I saying? I lost track. It's all good. It's all love, right? It's all love. All right. That means it's time to go because I'm definitely rambling. All right. I know what I was saying. Black Girl Hockey Club is going to have Soroya Tinker on IG Live. I believe it is 12 Pacific time. So what is that? 3 p.m. Eastern this Thursday. Renee Hess does an amazing job. I actually met the Tinker family at a Black Girl Hockey Club event in Pittsburgh. So, it's a family affair. Please support Black Girl Hockey Club. They do amazing work. Support, obviously, what we're building here. And thank you, Jeff. Thumbs up to you. I really appreciate Jeff gave me some great things to look into about Minnesota. And I'm so excited. I'm so excited to go down that road. We're going to have a good time. Shout out to Toronto. I know, unfortunately, there is a death in Toronto also, which, that just, and I apologize for not having the name, but that the circumstances behind that are very, very tough to hear. We're all hurting, but you know what? We're going to get through this together. All right, folks, I am going to enjoy. I'm going to have a little photo shoot with my new head wrap, catch up with some WoHo folks, and until next time, thank you so much. Have a great night.